Remember Russiagate? Remember for 4 years where every Democrat and media person told us that the most important story in the world was Trump was an asset of Vladimir Putin and that he may have colluded with Russia to get dirt on Hillary Clinton? Well, now we found out that the exact opposite was true, that actually the Hillary team was colluding with a known Russian spy named Igor Dashenko to totally concoct and fabricate the Russia collusion things directed at Trump. And of course, the FBI bit it hook, line, and sinker and went ahead and engaged in their coup against Trump, trying to stymie him, stopping him before he became president and once he was president, spying on him and doing everything they could for 4 years to stymie his administration. Who knows how the Republicans would have done in 2018 or 2020 if the entire intelligence apparatus, along with their mainstream media cronies, hadn't been going after Donald Trump as a Russian asset, when actually it was Hillary that committed the very crimes that they allegedly were investigating Trump for. Now, the trial of Sussman, who was a lawyer that was hired by Hillary Clinton, ended up in a not guilty verdict for him. Now, it did show that he concocted this story with a guy named Rodney Jaffe. There's a lot to the story, but suffice it to say, he was guilty. He did lie to the FBI. The real story is, though, that the FBI, even though they may have been lied to by Sussman, they knew that Hillary Clinton concocted this information, or her team. They knew it was a Russian spy that was at the front of this, was the primary subsource of it, and they didn't care. As the evidence has showed, the higher brass in the FBI was happy to investigate and spy on Trump. But new documents that were released in the Durham report shows that it goes even further than that. Comey, when he went, I believe it was March 8th, 2017, to the Gang of Eight, these 8 senators that are bipartisan that look into a bunch of important matters, he lied to them. And he lied in several ways, as we can see from the documents, which I'll link below. One of the things he did was he led them to believe that this information was coming from a Russian source, and in actuality it wasn't. It was coming from Igor Dashenko, who was a known Russian spy the FBI was investigating as early as 2008 as a Russian spy, but at this point was living in the United States, and he was just the subsource for Christopher Steele, who was being paid through intermediaries by the Hillary Clinton camp. And yet they didn't tell the Gang of Eight any of this. In fact, what's even more troubling if you look at this is, after they got 2 Fisa warrants in January of 2017, they actually interviewed Igor Dashenko. Now remember, in order to get a Fisa warrant, that means that you could spy on an American. And to do so, you have to allege that they are a spy from a hostile foreign country. So that's what they were doing at Carter Page. And through what's called a 2-hop rule, they were able to, by spying on one member of Trump's team, Carter Page, they were able to spy on the entire Trump campaign and administration, because they could get the communications of everyone Carter Page communicated with and everyone those people communicated with, which would get the entire administration. So what we know is that Igor Dashenko told the FBI once they finally interviewed him, yeah, this is all garbage. It was just fun stories that I was telling with my friends. I can't believe that the FBI is using this to investigate. Now, we previously knew that the FBI, despite finding the linchpin of their claims to be able to get a warrant to spy on Carter Page, was saying, yeah, all of it's garbage. And yet they lied to the FISA court and said, well, we talked to him and we think he was telling the truth, but failed to tell the court what he was telling the truth about was, yeah, the entire Christopher Steele dossier is garbage. They didn't tell them that, and even I.G. Horowitz in his testimony said he found that to be the most shocking thing, that the primary subsource himself said it's all garbage, and the FBI withheld that information from the FISA court. Well, they also withheld that information from the Gang of Eight. Remember, this meeting with the Gang of Eight that Comey had was on March 8th, 2017, but they had known since January of 2017 that all of the claims in the Steele dossier that were sourced by Igor Dashenko, and that was the bulk of the ones that were saying Carter Page is a foreign asset, Trump's colluding with Russia, he's going to give them favors and quid pro quos if they help him win the election. All of that was bogus. And yet the FBI and Comey was running around telling anyone that would listen FISA courts to get warrants to spy on Trump, or telling the Gang of Eight that we're going to launch their own investigations into Trump. He was telling them all, yeah, this is credible information. We're very troubled by this. Even though they knew at that point it was garbage. And this is really key, because this is one of the reasons that Trump was so frustrated. Trump knew that he didn't do what was alleged. And now we find out that Comey was sitting down and telling Trump, like, oh, we know you're not the target, you're not the target, you're not the target. But he refused to not only tell the public that, but was actually telling people like a FISA court and was telling people like the Gang of Eight that these people connected to Trump, and thereby possibly Trump himself, were actually colluding with Russia, and they had evidence that was corroborated. They never corroborated any of this evidence. In fact, they found the exact exact opposite. The relevant people that they got the evidence from said that the evidence wasn't true. This still remains the biggest scandal in political history in the United States. This is an actual coup attempt. This actually did affect the 2018 and 2020 elections. This actually did stop Trump from doing his agenda by gaslighting huge amounts of people in this country that he was working for Vladimir Putin. If you think that Russian interference is important, why isn't there an immediate investigation into Comey, the heads of the FBI, and the Hillary camp when they colluded with a Russian spy named Igor Dushenko in order to launch this investigations? Ask yourself this. What was more successful interference? Anything that was alleged done at Trump Tower or anything like that that Trump was accused of? Trump's campaign chair sending polling data to a Ukrainian who was chummy with Russia? Or the fact that Hillary Clinton, with a Russian spy, concocted the Russia collusion story that resulted in 4 years of nonstop stymieing of the president and probably cost Republicans the 2018 and 2020 election. You want to talk about a January 8th committee and a January 6th committee and insurrections? What happened January 6th pales in comparison to stymieing an administration as much as we saw from the Obama and Hillary camp that stymied the Trump administration by weaponizing the FBI. If you think that foreign powers, or people that have flags and zip ties have the power to shake up our democracy, what if our media colluded with the most powerful intel and investigative agency in history in order to tip the scales to constantly spy on a president of the United States? Watergate was just a couple bumbling fools trying to get information from a hotel. Imagine instead of that, it's the top brass at the FBI in collusion with the mainstream media that's helping them spread their lies in order to spy on and investigate a sitting president.